All right, so let's talk some car stuff on this counter show.
Yeah,
shall we?
Let's get into it, man. Let's now that we've talked rocks and that sort of stuff.
Or would you rather talk about Texas? And I think we can cover both in the same segment. What do you think?
I think it's going to happen. So. It got cold down in the great state of Texas, didn't it?
Yeah, so we had some of the blast, but not nearly as severe.
So let's talk about that weather phenomenon, okay?
All right.
Are you into weather at all? Do you study weather? Yeah, you have a weather station, don't you?
Yeah, allegedly.
Right. Yeah, so we had a big, huge Arctic blast to push into the great country of the U.S. and then further south into that other country, Texas. And we got it first. We got a load of snow here. We ended up with over a foot. And in certain places, even more than that. I think Mount Baker to the east of us ended up with somewhere around 53 inches of snow. And they're still getting snow even today, weeks after the big storms. Then it moved further east, and that's when the big push of Arctic air come down south. And what was it, like sub-zero temps, man? I mean, just major ice. And that's the difference between what we deal with here and then what you guys in the South deal with, Keith, is the fact that you have that overrunning of the air mass. So instead of falling as snow, which is better. I know that sounds crazy. I would rather have a foot of snow than 2 inches of ice any day. Any day. Nobody can drive in ice. At least with the right vehicle and some skills, you can drive in snow. You can shovel snow and get rid of it and pave your way. With ice, it just kind of hangs around and doesn't go away. Because of all of that, guess what? Texas didn't have no power for a couple of days, man, tell you what.
All right, so, where to start with this? Everybody, if you've been living under a rock in Stonehenge, I guess you haven't heard about the power problems in Texas. But for the rest of you, I don't want to go too much into the things you already know. But I want to maybe talk a little bit about why why the power shortage happened. But also, here we go with ingenuity again. So,
oh yeah, people just kind of living out the dream, man.
People have yeah.
We all want to kind of live off the grid every once in a while,
yeah.
right? I mean, this is just like
what you wish for, right?
Extreme, yeah. So
we have a guy here that, for those of you that didn't catch it on the podcast, we commented on a previous episode that Ford was, as an add-on option, you could order a generator built in to the new F-150 trucks. Now, I would expect this to be multi-purpose. Like if you're a big outdoorsman, I could see it coming in handy like a camper. Also, contractor, right? If you need to power your, table saw, whatever, some power tools, there you go. You've got a generator you can take right to the work site. Little did Ford expect that people would be using these things to heat their homes.
So in case you're wondering what we're talking about, we're talking about the Ford Pro Power.
Okay.
That's a feature. And it comes on some of their F-150s. The hybrid, as well as just the standard.
Yeah.
And like you said, who would have thought?
Yeah.
I mean, do you think Ford's intent was what we're about to talk about? I don't think so. I think it was to tailgate, to power up things when you're out tailgating at games and stuff like that. I think it was for WORKSITE projects.
Sure.
Stuff like that. But
and the grid in Texas, right? So
yeah.
this is going to tie into a couple themes that we've had on this show. So here's a little bit about what we understand, what I understand about why and how this happened. So weather was a factor. Now, if you're a first-time listener, welcome to the program. Thank you. Glad to have you.
Yep.
We have covered many times on this show where electricity comes from. And it does not always come from the same source. In fact, I feel like I should just record this, Jay, and just hit play every 4 or 5 episodes. But most states have a diverse complement of ways that they produce electricity. So I can tell you, like, for example, in Texas, they burn a lot of natural gas to produce electricity. In other states, like where Jay lives, there's a considerable amount of hydroelectric. It comes from dams, solar, wind. All those are ways that electricity can be produced. Burning coal is kind of the old way, still in use today. Right. So Texas has all of those means. The problem is that this cold blast affected every one of them in terms of their ability to produce at normal capacities, And
the mindset on that was just, we don't get storms like that.
It doesn't get this bad. Right.
It doesn't get this bad.
So I asked my neighbor, and ironically, I don't know how this came up. We were talking cars. And
this is so awesome. Yeah.
We were out sledding last week because, we got some of that ice and snow here. And we're all out at, the grown-ups are all standing around with flasks and the kids are sledding down the hills and it's 8 o'clock at night. And everybody's just having a good time,
You might taking bets on kids
right.
and whether or not they would hit their heads or
which adult is going to go down first, right?
Right.
I'm not going to name the guy because I don't know that he wants to be named, but he works for a local electric company here in my state. And I just said, so what kind of a problem to the grid is it going to be when we as a country, follow the mandate, that California started by 2035, we're going to be all electric, or that GM has said, by 2035, we're going to be all electric. What's that going to do? And he said, he goes, I realistically, the grid should be fine. He said, because when we build those out, we overbuild them. And I'm going to break this, I'm going to simplify this a little bit, but basically the lines that they run either from pole to pole or underground, those are capable of carrying that extra load. He said the problem that you run into is from the transformer on the pole out in front of your house, or if you have buried lines, on the ground in the box to your house. That part is typically not as robust. It's not overbuilt as much. So the grid itself can carry the extra demand to an extent, but the endpoints, right? The final destination of that power is where you're gonna tax it.
It's the inefficiency of the home itself.
Right.
It's lack of ability to be able to handle it. Yes.
So he said, so the thing that you have to keep in mind is, we have built in to our power networks the ability to, like, let's say when it's 95 degrees out here in Tennessee in the summer, we have built in the ability to go buy extra power from someone else, right? Like, so if it's TVA and they're producing hydroelectric power and they've got an extra demand, they can pull in, somebody else can transfer power to this sort of thing happens all the time here. Okay.
Right.
But Texas, not so much, because Texas can't source power outside of Texas. They're not set up for that.
Right.
Okay.
They have their own grid. They want to be their own.
They're independent.
They're independent. Yes.
So when they hit capacity, meaning everybody was running their electric because it was really cold, and you have this perfect storm, so to speak, no pun intended, of the sources that generate that power being reduced because of the storm. Well, now you have the rolling blackout situation that happened in Texas where we can't make enough power to keep up with the demand.
Right.
Hence, drive your F-150, back it right up to the front door.
Right.
And run the power line.
Boom.
Yep, and you got your heat.
Yep.
Or your, refrigerator or whatever.
Right. No different than having a gas power generator out there, but it's the F-150. Now, they said that the electricity flow, it needed to be 60 hertz for stability, but it fell below that to like 59.
So they had to try to keep it stable, so they introduced rolling blackouts.
But systems just started shutting down.
Yep.
And that's why. And then once that happened, they couldn't get the things back up. And this is why these people, the similar thing happened in 2012 in India. They had 700 million people that fell into darkness, no power in a situation like this. We were very close, or they were very close in this particular situation to it being very catastrophic. Infrastructure is completely screwed up in these times when that happens. And I mean, it can take months, if not years, to restabilize that. That's why this is such a big deal. And the problem, again, is like they were not, if they had that mindset of, well, it doesn't get that cold here. Well, I can say if you look back in recent history, even in my lifetime, I think the frequency of these types of events have increased, especially in Texas. I've seen a number of cold spell storms, not this bad.
And it doesn't have to be just cold. See, that's the thing.
No,
if you have a company like GM that says we're only going to be producing electric vehicles by 2035, you're not going to have a choice. You're going to have to plug that car in at night. And that's usually 220. And it's a big load on the grid. And if everybody plugs their cars in at night, it's an extra load on the... look, that's going to happen incrementally. It's not going to happen all at once. I understand that's a much milder case.
Right.
But this is not the isolated event that we seem to think it is. I think it's going to happen again.
It will. I think it will too. And my prediction is they could get another blast like this that could put them into deep trouble before this winter's over. I really hope that they get things back up and running. Now they say they're up and running in most locations now. Now guess what you have? Not only you had that situation, but it's the effect of that situation that caused all these poor homeowners that now have burst pipes that are also, it doesn't get that cold here. We'll never have to worry about pipes.
Right.
They don't think about that.
Right.
We do in our locations. Keith, I know you do. Even though you're in the South, you are geographically, you get a lot of storms, man.
Yeah.
That put you guys under the 20-degree mark quite frequently.
I always have some sort of backup plan. I mean, that's just sort of the way I live. I'm not really one to rely on other people to bail me out of trouble.
Right.
And, these are things that we've talked about at home as a family. Look, if we're without power for 3 or 4 days, I have a generator. I have, solar panels. I have ways to make power. I have an RV with solar panels on the roof that Jay helped me install. I mean, it's, we got options here. And I'm not going to, and I understand that's not the norm, and a lot of people that's for whatever reason, they don't have the means, whatever. They have to rely on that plug on the wall. That doesn't mean that you can't have some emergency preparedness at whatever level.
That's right. Even though some of these customers were further inland, say Dallas, Fort Worth, and even El Paso and those areas, they were still heavily affected by this. Now, during hurricane season, typically it's the coastal communities, and it'll get up into, you can get some high winds and heavy flooding rains up into Austin and Dallas and Fort Worth. It can reach that far, no problem. And I'm sure that a lot of those people are prepared because of that with, say, generators on hand. But there's a lot of people that are further inland that just aren't. They don't even think about it. And to add to that, you've got a system in place where the customers of this Texas power grid can choose to pay a specific way where it's a higher rate, and their rate doesn't go beyond whatever, but they can choose the fluctuating rate or whatever and get cheap year-round electricity. But boy, when it hits the fan, for example,
thousands of dollars, right?
Thousands of dollars. There was a gentleman in San Antonio that his name is Scott Willoughby. He's a 63-year-old Army veteran, lives on Social Security in Dallas. Said he had to empty his nearly all of his savings because he had to pay a $16,752 electric bill.
Yeah, now at some
That's
point,
insane.
I think there's going to be some probably that's not done, and the state's gonna step in and potentially regulate some of that.
Right. We'll say this: the governor has stepped up. He's working with Washington. There's been some disaster declarations put forth, so these folks will be able to go in and recoup their losses in that regard. I hope that this is a lesson in preparedness here for the state of Texas.
Well, I
don't know what else to say there.
I have a couple thoughts on that. Number one, state of Texas Ford Truck Salesman of the Year, especially with what did you call that generator package? The Ford.
It's the
Ford.
The Pro.
There you go, Pro Power.
Pro Power. That's
there you
it.
go.
Sorry, man.
So Pro Power Advocate of the Year. Ford just needs to go ahead and make it in the shape of the state of Texas, right? Give that award out. I mean, because this is great publicity for them.
Right.
And I sitting at the dinner table explaining to my wife like how this works, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I get it," because we had an RV and it all made sense.
So let me give you the lowdown on that. If you guys are not aware of what that is, Ford Pro Power on board is available in 3 flavors. Depends largely on the pickup's powertrain. Mm-hmm. The non-hybrid F-150 models are available with an optional 2.0 kilowatt inverter system that outputs via a pair of 20 amp and 120 volt outlets in the bed. Or you can choose the new hybrid power boost mode. It upgrades to a 2.4 kilowatt Pro Power system as standard equipment. They're hybrid, man. Finally, there's the most potent 7.2 kilowatt optional upgrade for the Power Boost Hybrid with 3 times the output, 420 amp, 120 volt connections, and a locking 240 volt NEMA plug. And you can speak to that, the NEMA plug.
Yeah,
it's similar to the kind that you'd plug your clothes dryer.
Yeah, it's
or your EV
RV.
into.
Yeah. So it just depends on what you're going to power, with them in terms of. Which one you get. Now, you can always step them down a lot of times, but you can't step up, meaning, if you buy the lower powered one and then, a year later you realize that you need to power a compressor or something that requires more juice, you're out of luck. So it's easier to step down. The other thing that I think we're going to see in Texas, Jay, is, the mental health, the demand for mental wellness services is going to go through the roof because you got all these people that basically were unable to connect to Facebook for a week. I mean, what are they going to do with their lives?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No Facebook, man. No social media, nothing. They couldn't get on there. Hey, unfortunately, there are some really, really sad stories that came out of this. I've seen quite a few stories of where people are just now recovering from water damage from recent hurricanes that have been fighting insurance companies for the last couple of years to try to get their home back in order, and then now all of a sudden they're having to start the cycle all over again because they've got pipes that have burst due to the extreme cold. It's just such a sad situation, man. I have a lot of faith in this country that we're going to step up and take care of these people. Like I said, I believe that they've declared some disaster relief to come their way, and hopefully that happens. So speaking of Ford F-150, though, there's a recall out there. I don't know if you knew this or not, but Ford announced a recall on Monday for select 2021 F-150. And when I say Monday, this is like last week. This is in February, guys. 2021 and 2020 and 21 Super Duty truck models over concerns that their windshields may not stay in place during a crash. Which could lead to the increased risk of injury during a crash. F-150 models that are being recalled were produced in Dearborn, Michigan, from October 27th of 2020 to February 3rd of 2021. The Super Duty models were built in Kentucky between October 3rd, 2020 and January 23rd, 2021. If any of your vehicles are affected, please contact your local dealership and have them take care of those concerns for you immediately. So there you go. Heard it here first, guys.
Do we have a we'll post that on the mention on the podcast page too with a link to the details.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.